started the first Lean-In community in China in 2013, it was a complete accident. I met a bunch of girls while partying in a bar, is what happened, as these things happen. I was a lawyer. I think I still struggle to call myself an entrepreneur or an investor, because I never had any intention of doing that. But what happened is that because of the social need that we were trying to address, which was very simply the fact that there was no urban or professional women's networks serving Chinese women. There were elite networks for very successful, very powerful women. There were expatriate networks, and there were also networks run by the government-linked All China Women's Federation in rural parts of China. When we started this community back in 2013, we did a simple survey to understand the needs of women around us, and they told us three things. Chinese women said that they lacked confidence, which is not a Chinese thing but a global thing. They felt that they lacked networks, and the third thing they said was that they lacked approachable role models. So what we did is that we started off with nothing, and we were purely a volunteer-run, community-based platform. And so that's what we call ourselves today. And then we started to evolve. We started to attract a lot of media attention. The numbers started to grow. Beijing spread to the other first-tier cities, Shanghai, Guangzhou, Shenzhen. It spread to the second-tier cities. It spread to the third-tier cities. It spread from 2 universities to 4 to 10 to 20 to now 60, 70. And then companies started to come to us, and it kind of surprised me. Last year during Women's Day, International Women's Day, the first company to approach us to speak to their employees was General Electric. So I was pretty surprised. And then the second one was Baidu, and then Bloomberg, and then et cetera, et cetera. And that's when I started to realize that, hey, there was a social need and there was a market need. That market was completely unserved in all of China, and China's a huge market. No one's looking at professional women's development in any serious way, apart from being charitable. I see a social enterprise as not just serving a social need, but capable of serving a market need. And so I quit my job at the end of last year. I was a banking lawyer doing strategic investments for the Chinese government to build us up full time. So I think the need is simple. I think people needed inspiration, but people needed more than that. They needed community, they needed networks, they needed services. And that is what we're trying to fill. And we can talk a little bit more about what those services look like. And it is constantly evolving because these needs are evolving. We're at a really interesting time in China right now. Last year, before I had quit, but I was thinking about, what am I actually going to do with this? I was invited to Guanghua School of Management, which is the top MBA school in China at Peking University, and to open a salon. I thought it'd be 30 people, but it turned out to be like 200 people. Jack Ma, who is the founder of Alibaba, and another rich real estate tycoon in China, they founded a program at Guanghua School of Management. It was a new MBA for social enterprise. Social enterprise, that's why I was really surprised to hear the statistic just now. Social enterprise is a really, really nascent concept in China, I think. There is no real legal entity for social enterprise, right? Apart from B Corp, right? But in Asia, there's not really a legal entity. Chinese people don't really understand what social enterprise is. Like, the concept is really new to them, let alone social investment or impact investment. They only understand philanthropy, which is donating money, and business, which is making a lot of money. And when I mean a lot, the Chinese take that seriously. So I think, a lot of people were really curious. That's why that salon was packed. It was their very, very first salon. Last year was the first year they launched the program. And Jack Ma was actually there to speak. I think this is in line with what is happening in China now. What they realize is that their philanthropy, a nonprofit sector, which is actually very heavily regulated by the government, they realize that it's inefficient, it's corrupt. There's been a lot of scandals, even with the Red Cross in China. And so I think the move towards social enterprise is part of that reform. How can you do good and make money at the same time, even though from a traditional perspective, that's really weird for them. And that comes to, that leads me on to one of my biggest challenges, which is, who am I going to find to fund this? Because a traditional VC in China, or like in any other part of the world, is interested in making big bucks, right? And foundations in general and other philanthropic organizations are usually used to supporting NGOs. And to start an NGO, a local NGO in China is actually not that easy. So we are kind of stuck in the middle. Ultimately, I think the right choice, the right decision. The most frustrating part is sometimes the most rewarding part. Apart from finding funders, it's about refining the business model or the product. And I think from the beginning, we were sort of going blind because we were just trying to figure out what worked. So I was telling you this afternoon, when we first started, our events were free, and they were always flooded. And then when we started charging a little bit, sometimes less people would come. But now I was telling Katerina quite confidently that if our event was our first product, now we're very comfortable with filling out the room no matter how much we charge, but we don't charge a lot. So that was the first product. And then the second thing we started to realize was that, okay, training, right? That's a kind of a service that you need. And then we tried to figure out what kind of training people needed. And now we're starting to see, even if the training, if the cost is a little bit higher, people are still willing to pay. But we're still trying to figure out that model. And then most recently, we started to realize that in terms of data for professional and urban women, qualitative data is almost completely missing, or reliable qualitative data is completely missing, not just in China, but all over Asia. So the UN knows what the labor participation rate is. P&G knows how much a woman would spend on a bar of soap. But nobody is actually really asking, what is the qualitative data? So what do women think? Do women think, there's discrimination? Do women think that things are unfair? Do women think that how do women define their success? I'm actually going to publish a white paper on this. Lean in China is in about a month's time. And when we started to do the white paper, it was purely nonprofit. And then we started to realize, hold on, companies are actually interested in taking it. And now what we're doing is we're starting to talk to companies who want their internal employees to do it. Now, convincing them to pay for it and to realize its value is something completely different. But we've actually started to test that product. We're testing the price. We hope to do 5 to 6 companies by the end of the year. But what I'm trying to say is that if you asked me 6 months ago that we'd be doing this, doing data as a product, there's no way I would have told you. I would not have believed you. If you told me 6 months ago we'll be talking to companies who'll be willing to pay for that, and again, that's a battle that I need to fight because Chinese companies are not used to paying for things like this. So I think that's also the most frustrating, but also the most rewarding, because you have the power through your thought leadership to shape a market, which is not quite there yet. Having a great mission is great. People identify with that. But I noticed with China, yes, they know that the message is amazing, but they're impatient. They don't just want the message. They want to know what they can get. And I feel like that really forced us, first of all, to be more relevant, to be more useful, and now it's forcing us to become sustainable. Because only by finding out what is relevant and providing it can you become sustainable. And I'll be honest with you, it's still a journey. Because I'm still finding out slowly what people are willing to pay for. One of my biggest challenges I face is that investors in Asia, they all want sure win kind of situations. So ideally, someone who calls himself or herself an impact or social investor in Asia wants to get great social impact and make the same amount of financial returns in the first place. If I was really optimistic on what will happen in the next few years, I hope that some of that will change. And some people realize that to have real social impact in the long run, you need to invest in the short run. And if you look at so many of these big companies, they took a long time to be profitable as well. So I think as well that for China specifically, there is a real ongoing reform of charities and the nonprofit sector. A lot of new laws being passed this year, actually. So I do see how a lot of charities and nonprofits are actually going to become more and more professional, or more professionalized, so to speak. And I think many of them actually will start thinking about sustainable business models and transition into more social enterprise models. Or at least that's what the Chinese government is hoping, and these great business leaders in China are hoping to do, so that they can serve the social sector more efficiently. So that's what I hope will happen. But what I am very afraid of is that there's not enough investment going into that, because we're still very stuck in traditional ways of thinking.